teach his grandparents how to use the Facebook and what the business model is and so on when he had the testimony for the U.S. Congress. But yeah, Facebook knows all about us. They collect data in a way that's really amazing, and it's one of the reasons why their handling of the data is one of the reasons why they're in trouble now. But we also know that this data is very effective when reaching your target audience, right? That's why they're the #1 platform for doing so. Now, off the network, there's different ways to collect this data. One is through tracking technologies, and the other is information that consumers voluntarily share. So with tracking technologies, we're pretty much all familiar with cookies, right? You visit a website that has a pixel or script on there, drops a cookie on the browser, next thing you know, there's advertisements following that user when he or she opens up that browser. And then, of course, the information that they share, whether it be through email, texting, credit card purchases, and of course, social media. Amazon, or excuse me, Amex knows I'm here today based on the ticket purchase, so on. They're going to probably send me more offers about similar events and so on in my local area. And then also our mobile service providers. Each mobile service provider has their own proprietary app that they use, and they use that to collect data on how you are actually using your mobile phone. So when you think about all of the digital footprints that your consumer has, what about the brands or the organizations or businesses that you represent? Think about it for a moment. What about your company's digital footprint? Because just as your company has a digital footprint, just as your consumers have a digital footprint, your company also has a digital footprint. And as consumers become savvier, they're looking at how your company's digital footprint is able to provide value for them. The same way that we as marketers are creating profiles of consumers based on their digital footprint to see if they can add any type of value to us. So it's something to really consider. Oftentimes, as marketers, we look at our own digital footprint. We're concerned with what we put on social media for our personal profiles, but the companies or brands that we represent, it's a different story. So I think we need to focus on our company's digital footprint and see how consumers are engaging with it so that we can further convert. Now, I mentioned to you earlier, there are essentially two ways that information is being collected for consumers. One is the technology side through web cookies, for example. The other is voluntary information that they share through social media, email, texting, and so on. So we look at those individual points to see, okay, are they adding value to our bottom line? Now, as consumers become savvier, they're looking at these particular points within your organization or business to see if you add value. So, for example, the hub, right? These are where ultimately you want your consumers to find you. This could be your landing page, this could be your website, and so on. They're looking at your paid platforms. Like, where are you advertising? And what's the context of your advertising? You know, we all heard of sponsors pulling out of like talk show hosts because of something negative that they said, right? Because consumers are voicing their opinion about who's actually sponsoring these hosts, and they're making their purchasing decisions accordingly. So that ultimately affects their digital brand. You're looking at your own platforms. This is what I call the digital beachhead. As I mentioned to you earlier, Digital Branding Institute is a beachhead for Digital Delane, which is the agency. Now, a digital beachhead is essentially, or beachhead is essentially a old military term where, you know, you set up a position on the beach so that you can advance. So in other brands, this could be like Johnson & Johnson has or owns mommy blogs, right? So setting up those particular beachheads for your brand are key, and also consumers are looking at that so they can get an overall picture of where your digital footprint is. Then you have your earned media, the sentiment around what people are saying through dark social, sending to their friends, and so on. And the brand health. You know, how long is it taking for you, your organization, or your brand to respond to customer concerns? When's the last time you guys posted something really interesting, right? All of this helps to inform your consumers as they become savvier, because they're looking at all of these individual points in your digital footprint to see if your brand is valuable to them. So why map it? Why map your digital footprint? Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, it gives you that bird's eye view of how your target audience is engaging with your brand in the digital space. And it'll allow you to identify where you can optimize each and every location that they're experiencing the touch points of your brand. Here's a great quote, and I love it it's basically from a survey from the Verse Group and Jupiter Research, saying that 63% of US CMOs and marketing managers think traditional brand positioning and advertising are losing their effectiveness and essentially are broken. And that's true, because I work with clients who have built business models off of data from 2 years ago. Obviously, things have shifted. I gave an example with Facebook earlier. Because they're in such big trouble, now they have to readjust, and now they're adjusting their network in order to be more transparent and open, which is affecting how we as marketers are able to utilize their platform and to serve advertisements to our target audience. So here's what I think that most marketers, or many marketers, have an issue with, and that is taking the same attributes of traditional marketing and applying them to digital marketing. Remember the time where we were trying to chase the algorithms and we're trying to focus on how many characters should I include in a post, or should I include an image or link, so on and so forth. And now it's completely changed. The landscape has completely changed, so we're still adopting those traditional marketing tactics because it's easy. It's most comfortable for us to do so. So I'm starting to think, is there actually such a thing as traditional digital marketing? And if so, what would that be? I think ultimately it's adopting those same principles of traditional marketing, being very interruptive and invasive with our advertising. And so here's what I want to point out, is that as marketers, we have many different business objectives, we have many different campaigns, but oftentimes we get really stuck with our head down and comfortable, and we aren't as nimble as the market. So if we go beyond the traditional aspects of utilizing digital platforms in order to reach our audience, then I think at the end of the day, those marketers who do so will win. And that's why I think that digital branding influences the purchase decisions, because it's not interruptive, it's not invasive. Right now, the focus should be on creating a brand. I would say even more so than creating a product or a service. Because the bottom line here is, you can sell a rock and make $1 million. It's almost like it doesn't really matter what the product is necessarily, but once you have that brand affinity, then you're naturally going to create more products based on the affinity that your target audience has with your organization. So these are some things to think about. I think that digital branding is the whole puzzle. Now again, going back to the theme of where your digital brand can help influence the purchasing decisions for your target audience, is because if you consider your digital brand, then you would consider the overall spectrum of all of your digital marketing tactics. So let's say, for example, there's the 3 main digital marketing tactics. We all know what they are, right? You have social media, you have content marketing, and you have search engine optimization, or SEO, right? Now, I love all those marketing tactics. I think they're great, but oftentimes as marketers, we look at those marketing tactics in a vacuum. We're focused only on a social campaign, only on a content marketing campaign. Or for this quarter, let's focus on SEO. But I think we should look at all those digital marketing tactics together. So for example, with social media, oftentimes we, again, try to focus on how we're able to optimize our social media engagement so that we can increase our organic reach. What we know now, you have to pay to play. Social media marketing has plateaued. And based on the new updates with Facebook, the granddaddy of all social networks, now it went from being an organic platform to having to pay to play, now having to engage in order to reach your target audience. So no matter if you are posting something organically or using paid platforms, in particular for Facebook and Instagram, you're still going to have to engage. So this is something that you should think about for your brands. We all know that with Facebook in particular, they're starting to split the news feeds, separating brand messages from friends and family. So how are you going to get over to that news feed? You need to be more personal, right? So these are some of the things that you have to think about, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Then you have content marketing. We're all familiar with content marketing, right? I love it. It helps nurture your target audience through all the phases of your sales funnel, which is great. But as consumers become savvier, they're starting to recognize what makes a great piece of content. So for example, they may see some content that showcases a person frolicking through a field of wheat and some soft music in the background, an inspirational message, and then your brand, right? They're starting to become desensitized to those types of marketing messages. And they're starting to understand the formula of what it takes to make great content. Everyone is doing the same thing. On top of that, you have content overload from the ISPs, the big four. You have Facebook, you have Amazon, you have Netflix, right? All those different ISPs that are creating content itself. So now consumers are becoming savvier and they're suffering from content overload, right? So you can't just focus on content marketing and consider that in a vacuum. And then you have SEO. Well, as you know, there's black hat practices of SEO specialists that are trying to game the system. What happens? Google sweeps the rug from underneath people's feet and their rankings drop. They basically change their algorithm because now they're trying to figure out the best way to present the right piece of content to the search, to the user. And so these are things that you all have to consider, right? And they shouldn't be considered in a vacuum, but you must take a look at the overarching strategy, which essentially is your digital brand. And that would help to easily convert your target audience. So I talked about how consumers are becoming savvier, and normally how we as marketers are looking at their digital footprint in order to see if certain consumers are valuable to our brands, and how consumers are looking at your organization's digital footprint to see if your organization can provide value to them, and how that value is displayed in your digital footprint, which makes up your digital brand. All right, so now I'm going to talk about how to map your digital footprint. So we're all familiar with this, right? This is the generic sales and marketing funnel, right? At the top of the funnel, you have awareness, consideration, decision, and retention. Very linear, very linear. Unfortunately, as consumers become savvier, they go outside of this funnel. They're not going to follow the steps necessarily that we set for them. For example, if you have an incentive, a download that you're offering, consumers know, okay, let's put my email address in. They're going to probably follow up with me from a series of emails. I may even get a phone call, so on and so forth. So now they become desensitized to your messages that you're sending because you have everything programmed based on this funnel. This is what the modern funnel looks like. It's more flexible, right? Because you may have a consumer or your target audience coming to you, and you may be on their short list. They may be ready to buy right away, or they still could be, in the retention phase. So if you're serving them information that you would serve at the top of the funnel, well, that's not going to be effective, right? So they're going to go outside of that. They're going to go to social media. They're going to go to some online communities, third-party reviews, so on and so forth. So this is the new funnel. It's less linear. It's flexible. 87% of US CMOs, based on the survey from Verse Group and Jupiter Research, and marketing managers believe that branding initiatives need to be more flexible today than in the past. And this is so true because, as I mentioned earlier, I deal with clients who have set up complete businesses based on antiquated data based on the online behaviors of consumers from 2 and 3 years ago, right? It's not working anymore. So you have to obviously be nimble in order to truly reach your target audience. And this is what I call finding that desired path. I don't really go by funnels anymore. I just figure out where do my target audience want to, where does my target audience want to purchase my product, and what is that process like for them? Oftentimes, the cheat code is looking at the analytics, but you have to look deeper into the analytics. And I'll give you an example. I mentioned earlier I'm the Senior Digital Brand Manager for the University of Southern California, and we have analytics on our website. If we were to only use the analytics for our website, then we would miss the mark. And here's why. Because our target audience is students and parents, right? So you have parents that are visiting the website and they're consuming content that they want to pass along to their student. This could be engineering, this could be law. Well, the student wants to do dance or wants to do art. So which information would we serve them when we're trying to create a nice fit for our target audience on our campus? So these are some of the things that we have to think about as marketers, going beyond the analytics and the numbers to really find that desired path for our target audience. So I talked about it enough. Mapping your digital footprint. So I'm going to get right to it. How do you map your digital footprint? What's the secret sauce? What's the special formula? All it really is some elbow grease. Simply documenting the state of your digital brand. Well, what does that look like? Well, simply taking screenshots of your digital brand, meaning everywhere your digital brand has a presence online, taking a screenshot of that, making a caption, making sure that every page you have screenshot has the caption there. I would even include a date as well. Now, these are some things that senior managers, marketing managers, and even interns have done to add value to their organization. Because over time, you would be able to see exactly how your digital brand has transformed. And again, you'll be able to see where there are spots where you need optimization. And of course, once you have all of that content and screenshots available, save them to your computer or to the cloud, and then obviously make sure that you have the captions there as well. Now, I had clients that do this very thing, and they found, old campaigns that weren't removed, because now, once you find these campaigns, these consumers can be consuming outdated content, which obviously is not going to leave a good impression, right? You have slipping in search rankings. You have affiliates and other partners that are having the wrong information right out there, or outdated information. So as you map your digital footprint, you would be able to see that. And as affiliates, for a brand that is hiring you to promote their products or services, they have a bunch of affiliates. So if they map their digital brand, your affiliate interactions and campaigns would be included in that digital branding footprint, or that digital footprint. So once you've mapped your digital footprint, and you may see different things that need to be optimized or updated, I have 3 tips for you. These are 3 specific tips on how you can optimize your digital brand. The first tip is to use data to create content. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, as marketers who are trying to create content and oftentimes stay relevant, we create content for content's sake, meaning we get stuck on the hamster wheel. We have a new initiative or a new campaign, we got to push out some content, right? So what I mean by using data first is to look at the data that your consumer is providing, and then create content based on that. And that way you would naturally be able to meet your business objectives. Now, 65% of marketers aren't able to determine what content is and is not effective. And that's simply because, again, we all suffer from it. We create content for content's sake. We often don't have a robust strategy around our content. And as a result, we just don't know truly how effective our content is. So here's a case study. At the University of Southern California, in particular for their admissions department, we utilize data first to create content. Now, here's an example of actual data points. These are things, questions that were asked and that came in through our Twitter profile. And we essentially look at the data and try to identify different themes and keywords within that data. So if there is a recurring theme about dorm life or tuition, then obviously we create more content around that. And we also look at where the data is coming from, whether it be international students, domestic students, so on and so forth, right? So that's an example of a way to use data first to create that content. And you essentially would create content to fill gaps, not to meet your business objectives, but to fill gaps. And again, for us, we would send out information, we put information on our website, send it out through snail mail, but we'll get calls in through our call center that ask the same thing. So obviously there's a gap in communication somewhere, so let's create content to essentially fill that gap. So as you use data to create content, you're using data to fill gaps. You're not creating content specifically to meet your business objective, but you're creating content to meet the objective of your target audience. Optimization tip number 2, showcase brand personality. We all know this, right? I think this is probably the number 1 tip that I have for any brand, is that you must showcase personality, especially in this particular market, because with the Facebook crackdown of promotional and salesy messages, the only way you're going to be able to fit in a timeline filled with photos from friends and family and content from friends and family is if your brand has personality. On top of that, Facebook naturally is going to reward those brands who are personal. They have AI systems in place to search for salesy and promotional type of messages. And naturally, your reach is going to be inhibited because of it, regardless if it's organic or if it's paid. So that's the number 1 tip, is showcasing your personality. So as you map your digital footprint and you notice content that could be missing the mark, or your engagement levels aren't as high as they once were, or you're not building a sense of community, I honestly think that it's because you have to showcase more personality for your brand. And one of the reasons, again, I talked about Facebook splitting their news feeds and inhibiting promotional and salesy messages is because if you understand social networking business, the more monthly active users you have, the more revenue the site generates. If their monthly active users dip because they're finding promotional and salesy messages, it's less revenue. So this is what I call the brand apocalypse. Pretty much when brands have ruined Facebook and they've taken over the news feeds and they start to promote content that's lifeless with no emotion and no personality. Optimization tip number 3, improve your brand signals. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, this has to do with your search ranking. So I believe that Google is starting to differentiate between branded content and generic content. And even more so now because with the presidential elections and the whole issue between fake news and real news, so on and so forth, there's these major ISPs have to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with this type of content? Facebook is scrubbing through all that stuff and creating AIs to identify and pull that type of content out. But what is Google doing? I think one of the things that Google is going to do is identify, again, those branded content versus the generic content. And so if you have a brand that is affiliated with a national industry directory, for example, you want to make sure that you're included in that directory, because that's going to naturally increase your search ranking, and it gives signals to Google to say, hey, you know what, this is actually a branded website or a branded piece of content versus a generic one, right? So making sure that you're affiliated with those industry directories or have a major influencer in the industry to obviously link back to your content and so on. That's going to help your search rankings. Also, with regard to social media, we know that social media has something to do with search visibility. So you want to make sure that all of your social profiles are verified. I strongly believe that that's going to help with your search ranking. Again, when Google is trying to identify fake news versus real news, branded versus generic, all those things are going to come into play. So as you map your digital footprint, you may notice a slip. If you notice a slip, these are some of the things that you can do to help in that process, amongst others. All right, so key takeaways for today. We talked about mapping your digital footprint, how exactly to do that. Right? You want to take pictures of snapshots of where your brand lives online so that you can see exactly how consumers are interacting with your brand in the digital space. And then also use that map to build your digital brand. And so that you can use that digital brand to influence the purchasing decisions of your target audience. And then once you see some different points in that footprint where you need optimization, I would highly focus on using data first to create content, looking at the data, maybe even the questions that your target audience is asking, and then create content based on that data, not specifically on your business objective or an initiative, because honestly speaking, once you fulfill the needs of the consumer, your business objectives are naturally going to be met. Then showcasing your personality. Right? We know that brands have taken over the newsfeed for Facebook, and Facebook has reacted accordingly. So in order for you to get organic reach that you want, as well as paid reach that you want, you're going to have to showcase more personality. Then also, the third tip was improve your brand signals, making sure that you have all of your social media verified, and as well as you have a presence on any of the industry websites that with the industry that you're obviously in. So those are my 3 tips and takeaways for mapping your digital footprint. And I'll leave you with this. For any relationships to be successful, there needs to be love and communication, appreciation, and understanding. Now, in order to really get a sense of how your audience is interacting with your brand in the digital space, I highly recommend that you map your digital footprint, because it'll give you a glimpse of how your target audience goes from being a prospect to a customer. And as any great marketer knows, the more that we know about our target audience, the better we'll be able to market to them. So instead of focusing on the analytics of the way in which they consume your content, or focusing on tweaking your campaigns here and there, let's focus on building experiences and how those digital experiences are going to help to convert your target audience. And the best way to do that is, of course, to map your digital footprint. Thank you. So I guess I have time for some questions. Sure.
That was really interesting. You talked about screen capturing all your different, all your different content and annotating when it actually happened. It seems like it would be a pretty big task, especially like having interns. Are there any tools in the industry that help actually go and scrape and find that?
There's no one tool that is able to do all of that, and that's why I say there's no secret formula, but just elbow grease. And I've seen senior managers pass this along to their managers, and their managers pass it along to their interns, right? It just goes down the ladder that way. But ultimately, it gives you a great example of how consumers are interacting with your brand outside of just looking at the analytics. Right, and so the only tool specifically is just screen capture. And making sure that you're organized in folders, and it could be separated based on date or campaign and so on. And so that's the approach that I would take.
But agree generic content, where does that come from?
Well, yeah, it's generic content would just be a term, right? And so if your content isn't coming from a credible source, right? And there's algorithms that identify what a credible source is. So I think that based on that algorithm, it would and should include things like if the profile is verified that's distributing the content, if that particular website is also linked with other industry websites, so on and so forth. So anything outside of that realm could be considered generic, right? So that's what I mean with generic and branded content. All right, well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Good luck for the rest of the day and enjoy the conference.